So I've been trying to figure out the best way to present some of these things, and I'm going to try to see if I can present the elements in a constructional basis. So the first thing I'm going to cover is defining a character or a hero or an actor in general. So if we look over here inside of our actor, we have a hero. Our hero is just in general a mannequin. So we have a skeleton, and we want that skeleton to be in our game. Along with this skeleton, our skeleton has skin, clothing element, an eye, and hair, which in the original video with the character customization, those are the materials that I have in place that have certain parameters in it that can define your actual character and color and things of your skin. Along with a character that has configurable elements, we also have actor data. We have character billboards. We might have a combo list and spells, a class, and then special skills. To be able to bring all this together, well, should I say, the thing that brings this all together is the PC hero. And the PC hero is the main element of a character, while it no longer has the ability to have an actual mesh inside of it in general, and it has no controls, no character controls in it in general. Because it's a modular piece, the PC hero is still something that comes together to bring all the elements of a character together to make it a full solid object. So the first thing we want to do is, in our database manager, we want to define a class, because a character needs a class to be able to operate. The class has its base stats that you can change here from your min to your max. You can use your mods to be able to control the curve of progression. I have general battle simulations, so that way you can see on average how this character will progress, how it'll attack, a different class type. Not a different character type, but a different class type. Since a character could have armor and things like this, this is just the general basis of a class or or the general form of battle stats in general. You can go through. I try to gear everything for in general for most RPGs, where when you start off an RPG and you have your customizable stats, it seems that 10 is the max stat cap for any kind of situation where you're trying to put in your own custom attribute points. So I tried to use that as the same balance, to where mediocre would be somewhere around 5. 1, 2, and 3 is just like poor stat, and then 10 would be your most powerful stat in general. And that's how I had to try to scale this and test this, and in the general use of stats. I have different logs that changes the curve and progression curve of these mod stats. So the lower you go in the log, the more dramatic the progression is when you level up. And it was also changed how drastically different at the end of your progression, how far away your stats are from each other, based on the progression and the curve of the stat. I don't have it to where it can suddenly jump up, like, stair step up 10 points for a level like I know they do in like, for instance, in Final Fantasy, they would completely change the cap off, and how am I trying to say this? They would change the curve to be more of a manual graph instead of a constant linear curve like this for certain aspects of the game where they wanted to halt the actual power increase of an actual character until they came out with, extended levels after that, and then they would go back and readjust all those individuals. With this is just a plain and simple incremental curve to add some kind of progressive stats. If you want to change how this works, you can do that in the baseline of the code, but this is just a general of how I have it set up right now. So in a class, we give it a name, and we give it a class link in the blueprint side. And this class, if I can find it over here, this class will tell us the rest of the information about that class in general. So outside of stats, the things that makes up a class is how that class type will move, how fast it can move around your world, what animation BP that you want to be linked to that, the animations that this class can use within that animation BP, any kind of special type of things, like, for instance, the field action for different classes will change based on that class. The execution of a field action can change based on the class. So any kind of given customization that you want specifically for a certain class type can be done here. Even though general animations are here as well for item usage, opening a chest, scanning an area, or picking up an item, those are usually general animations. But if you want a class to specify a certain character type, you can specify everything within here. You can also put together a combo list. And for right now, a combo list, if I can expand it all out, a combo list is used in the turn-based battle anytime you hit attack. So what it will do is, depending on your level, it will add a certain number of combos to a list to execute on the enemy. So if you go from a low hit to a high hit to a circle kick to some kind of like fourth hit combo move to go on to some other kind of move, you can set up a attack list within here. Similar to my action battle, where normally when you mash a button and input, you can go between a high attack and a low attack and things like that. I kind of use the same principle here in the move list for the turn-based system to be able to go through these combo lists and build something for your actual character to do when you hit attack. So that way it's not a one hit. As you level up, you get access to more combos that you can do more damage to an enemy as you progress in general. And these are separated by light attacks and heavy attacks, which right now are just the same animation. But if you want to be able to use a special trigger to use mostly hard attacks, or use a special trigger to be able to switch between light and heavy attacks in your system, you can. And this just gives you the ability to set some kind of move list that you can draw from to do just basic attacks. Along with these basic attacks, if I can close all this, there is a section in here for skills and abilities. depending on how many skills you have for your class, you can go in here and attach skills and spells to a character, and each of these skills and spells will be set up for whatever level they're supposed to be learned at, whatever animation that you want them to be triggered by, and I can go over that in just a second, but let me get through this other section real quick. So, pretty much as for the class setup, it's just general animations that you're going to use for your class, how this person move around the world, what kind of battle victory information they have, if they want to say something special, what kind of death animation they have, what kind of revive animation, all that just general stuff for animations. And one question may be why I have this animation this way in here, and it's because that I have a pseudo C++ driven, object-oriented driven animation system that I'll go over in another video. But for right now, this is what defines a class along with this attributes in the database manager. So that way you can apply this class to an actor. So if we go down to an actor is given a name. It's given an actor BP link, which is also in Blueprint as well, just like the class was. General stats that will add stats on top of a class. So just in case you wanted two people to be of the same class but different strengths and attributes, you can change this here as well. You can set up what starting equipment that person's going to have. You can set their class type, what the starting level will be when that person actually joins your party, a bio description of the person, as well as you can do simulations based on these added stats to see how on a enemy basis how this person would do against a certain enemy type, how much they would hit them for, how much their magic would hit for, how much damage that they would take from a hit from this specific enemy type, so on and so on and so on. So if we go to the blueprint side of a actor, we can see that the only thing that we have in here is a list of meshes. The reason I have a list of meshes for an actor is for those type of RPGs where you don't really have armor per se, but you may have outfits. I made this an array list so that way as you unlock outfits, you can store this somewhere so that way you can give it the ability for the end user to be able to switch between outfits that are unlocked, and you can just constantly add as many outfits that you want or that you want in general for your character. The morph data. Before, I used the morph data for being able to do character customization, but I now see that I probably need to use character data more for morphs that could be used for, like, you know, in a cutscene or during dialogue to show, you know, expressions, emotions, or things like that on a character versus being able to, you know, randomize how big or small the character looks, how their chin looks, and things like that, because that can be stored separate in the database for actual morphs, and this could be a definition for just being able to bring in certain emotions, expressions, and things like that that can be, you know, triggered in the system. And the morph data in general has settings that are just pretty much say, hey, I have a smile and I have a scale value for that smile that when it's at 1 and a full smile is on, I want these morphs to be on. or if I have an angry, unjust face, I want all of these morphs to be on at this value to be able to generate this expression. Along with the actor data, I have just the general character billboards that show up in different different pages for the character display screen, or the battle actor, or the active battle, or if I wanted to have a character face for dialogue, even though I don't use that, I have the ability here. So you can, if you want to, you can have multiple arrays on this array list for emotion, for an emotion list, to be able to, just load up the character's emotion for that current statement that they're making in their dialogue. And that pretty much is the actor data setup in general. So you can control what all the person is actually wearing and things like that as it goes along. When you save your game, I'm actually updating this character information inside of the database, and since it saves it to a separate database file in general, if for some reason you're debugging and you're in the middle of making your game and you're like, I need to try out this item, you can actually save a save slot, open it up with the database manager, change his armor to whatever you want to try out for that part of the game, load your game back up, and you should have that item in there. And this is all without changing your source database, so you can still have a constant progressive check and modifications of your game while you're building it without, messing up your original database. And I know I had an issue before to where anytime you had to start over, you had to go back and pretty much start a new game to be able to get that new and updated data into your system. So now you don't have to do that. You can just keep going and keep building forward without having to, reload stuff from a source database, or make sure that you're editing the right database when you do things. So we have the class, we have the actor. I guess I can go into the combos right now. So before, I had skills and abilities in a database. The problem with that was the fact that when you want to change something, when you want to make your own customizations to a skill, a person had to edit the database manager, edit the database, and then bring that stuff into the system, edit the engine, the RPG engine underneath the hood, and then finally get their skill that they wanted to add or modify or add something to into the engine. That was too many steps for some people to even do. So what I did was completely remove skills and spells from the database and added a data asset object that can have those same stats already in the engine. I don't need that in the database in general, because the reason I have the base stats and the base classes and things like that in the actual database is because when making your characters, making your enemies and things like that, you want to be able to bring those armors and equipment stats and be able to do simulations while you're creating them to make sure they're not overpowered, they're not underpowered, and they do what you want to do for whatever level that they're supposed to acquire it in and whatever enemy type that they're fighting with that armor on. So skills and abilities didn't need to be there in general for that. So for that reason, I made this. So you have your skill icons, you have the animation that's going to execute for that skill or the that skill or the spell. You can define the description of the attack, what level you want them to learn it at. If you have a special cost, like a separate side cost for using that skill, you can put it under tactic costs. And then if for some reason it uses stamina SP, tactical points, MP, or whatever, you can use that. You can use usage costs for that. You can define whether you want it to be auto learn, things like that. If you want to come in and add in your own special thing to this data set, you should be able to even like make a child of this object and create your own addition to the data set. Or you can even go into the C++ code and add any additional fields that you want in here. But this is just the general setup. This is most of the stuff that I had in the database before, except for now you can just define all of this right here and apply it to whatever character is going to use this skill in their individual class tree. And like I was explaining before in the demo, here is how I set the difference in power. Since I don't have the skills or abilities in the database anymore, executing a skill now either does a power offset of whatever your base power is for your class. Instead of specifying that, this does 50 points of damage or things like that, it says, based on my current attack power, this move I want to be 1.5 times my base power scale. So that way, if for some reason this skill needs to be, dumbed down a little bit or whatever, you can scale it back here with this multiplier. You can also apply give it an accuracy base for the attack. You can tell the AI that's using the skill how close or how far back you need to be before you can actually execute this animation, or how far of a distance that this skill will actually use. So that way, if for some reason you have a ground stump and you want that ground stump to be further, you can change a further distance. You can change that here as well. I do have the ability to do this on a per instant basis within an animation, but I can go over that later. This is where you can also add your status effects and things like that to a skill or an ability. So if for some reason when you execute this, it gives you a bonus speed, it gives you an attack bonus, defense bonus, things like that. You can do that here. And same thing with status effects. If it's just regular damage, poison effect, blind, what have you, that can all be right here and set there. And then I also have status accuracy, since not all status effects are 100% guaranteed to work. The hit effect and the damage particle is just something that when you process damage on an enemy, it'll look at that skill that you just used at it and see what type of particle it needs to spawn on itself to represent damage, and what kind of sound effect that damage should do. What kind of sound effect should happen when that skill hits the enemy. The rest of this down here is only used for NPCs in general. Well, not NPCs, but the AI characters are AI enemies. So they can keep track of how many turns they've gone through, or the last time stamp they did an ability, or if they've used an HP limit to be able to know that they shouldn't use this skill anymore, or how long until they can actually use this skill. Because if you note right here, excuse me, you can actually set up a skill for the enemy AI type to be able to execute this skill only when you got to a certain life level, or after a certain number of turns they're going to execute this skill, or every 30 seconds they're going to execute this skill. So that way when they go through and try to see what ability they should do next, if they are on an AI mode for even the party member or the enemy type, which are always on AI mode, when they go through to pick their next move, if one of these triggers, they'll use this move instead of doing a base attack in general. Or if they die and they have, you know, if life value is set to 0 and they have, you know, a death move that will blow themselves up or something like that and do damage to anybody around them, that'll execute right then and there as well. Set this back to where it was before. And this is for a combo in general or just a physical attack. For spells, spell data assets like this fire, this spell data asset is pretty much set up the exact same way. It's just class defined as a spell instead of a skill or an attribute. And it'll show up in whatever given list that you need it to show up for your menus in general. I guess let me show this off. So stop that. I'm sorry if that was really loud on you. Setting up an animation to be able to do the different sounds, to do trails, information, to be able to determine when a hit is going to go through. I have all of these animation notifiers set up for operation in the system. So when you execute this, if you look through here in general, you have your basic things for like playing an animation, activating the trail for a weapon and things like that. But I also have some RPG set animation callbacks. So you have things like the turn-based cone hit, which will tell the system, hey, I need to do a hit detect for a cone for this current attack, for this current frame. So if you go here, when I get here in the move, that means, hey, I want to be able to hit every enemy within a cone of me right now. And what that would do is look over here to the animation information, and I can say, hey, this is going to be a cone type hit. It's going to use the main weapon, so that's what you should look at for the stats of doing damage. This is going to be a physical damage and not a magical damage. Preview just turns on the traces, so if I can do that right now. If you can see right now, when I get there, it turns on the trace. So that way I can get a visual feedback of how it's going to trace and get enemies within my area. Now, mind you, seeing this looks like it's going to hit everything even behind me, but I'm just doing this simple trace to be able to get all the objects in me, well, not in me, around me, and then I'm going to code that information based on parameters. So for instance, I said that I want the hit radius to be 350. So I'm doing a sweep of a spear sweep around me based on the 350 size, but then I'm going to code that information by, you know, my forward vector by 90 degrees. So that way I only hit enemies within a 90-degree angle of in front of me. So that way, if an enemy is behind me, he won't get hit. Only the ones that's within the 90 degrees of me will get hit. I can also go in here and say, hey, on top of the damage curve that I set, well, the damage multiplier that I put in the original, you know, setting for this skill, I want to also add a little bit more damage to this specific hit. So you can add a 3 times multiplier for some reason, if you want to this move to be able to increase the damage and have like more refinement tweaks to how your skill is executing. Pushback just, you know, allows you to push back an enemy, and Pushback power is how much force will be applied to the actual pushback effect. So if we look at this move right here, when the cracks come through to damage the ground, those cracks that are generated, if I can just play it, will actually push the enemy backwards. So for those moves, I've said, okay, allow a pushback power of 2, but I also have a damage multiplier of 1.5 to those specific hits, since those are the actual end of that skill combo, so that way it can do more damage. And again, based on, if we look at these hits right here, these are shorter hits with a hit radius of 350 and a cone shape of 90. When we get to this part, we increase the hit radius to be even further out and an amplified damage based on that. So you can have a little bit of excuse me, you can have a little bit of control on what you do here. And the difference between this one and this one here is these are line-based traces for the cone hit, and actually I don't have a different one. I'll get to another one that has the other type, but this is a cone-based hit. I also have straight line hits for like box traces that are for, forward punches and things like that won't necessarily have a cone effect of a damage effect. It will have more of a straight line effect for its damage, fall off. The move forward that I have here, I don't know if I don't think this preview will show it. I'm trying to see if I can see it. But what this does in general, let's see if this works. Yeah, we go. So if for some reason, let me turn the volume down. If for some reason that I had an ability that would move the character forward, I can come in here without having to go back to my base animation and actually be able to control the character moving forward within an animation. Now, if you're using a preview within here, the problem is he just keeps going forward and not coming back. I have another animation notifier that will reset his position if I can find it. Oh, they updated the animation notifier list. That's pretty cool. If you haven't noticed, I haven't used 4.1 or 4.21 since I had to update the toolkit. So some of these things that I see are just new. So now I can do a forward movement and I can turn it on preview. So after the character moves forward, when it gets to this reset personal location, it'll reset the animation back. So this is just for in-game, not in-game tweaks. This is for in-persona tweaks that I can use to be able to determine if my character is moving the way I want him to move. So now I can change this back to, I think I had it set to 2. So that way they'll do very light forward movements. And I had this one before to where it would do a giant leap forward, but I kind of pulled it back some because it looked like it was doing a little bit too much when I was playing the actual battle. It was doing too much of a giant leap, so I just changed it back to very soulful movements. But that's the type of stuff that I was trying to make making skills a little bit easier in general. Let's see. So I can turn off the preview for these. And then we can remove this reset. Because the reset doesn't need to be there for the actual execution of it in the engine. Because you want them to be able to move forward without being reset backwards. Like I said, that was just specifically a callback that I use in Persona. So just in case that's really loud, I don't know how the caption is recording the other audio, so I'll stop that for now. But this is pretty much a general setup of how I set up excuse me, how I set up skills. And to detect the end of a skill and know that it's done, right here at this effect, right when I smash the ground, this character is considered done with this move. He has nothing else to do, and the rest of it is just the effect animation that's executing. So this character, if he has another skill queued up in a system, or if this is like a button mashing system where you're saying that, hey, I have all these little inputs it. At the end of this animation, I want to go back and do the rest of my skills that I have queued up. That's what this will trigger. And if it doesn't find any more skills or inputs in the input buffer, if you're doing an action game, then it will fall off and return back to its character's neutral state. I think that might be it for defining the character. You got the character billboards. You got the actor data that specifies just the mesh of the character. You have the combo list that can be chained together. Like this is just a basic combo. This is just a basic attack. Set up the exact same way as before, but more simplified. So you have the trail, you have the voice, you have the point of impact for this cone hit, and you have the end of attack detection on the, I forgot what they call it, the, let me see, you have the anticipation, you have the hit, and I think this is the recoil or the reset frames. I can't remember what the technical term is, but this is where you would detect that, hey, I want to execute another skill right after this. Otherwise, you know, the combo will end and you reset back to your neutral frame. I think as for defining a character, all of that is the basic of everything. To be able to put your character within like the initial level, inside the initialization section, you can always just add that to that person or that actor to the initial party list, and that party will be there when you start a new game. Any other actors that you want to add to your party, you can use the simple events in the event system to be able to add and remove party members. And pretty much you just say, hey, I want to add this person, I want to change my party, I want to add this member to my party. And just in case for some reason you set up something the wrong way, it's already set up to be able to ignore the addition of someone that's already inside of your party. I'm going to stop now before I go on too far and end up rambling, and see what I can cover in the next video. Thank you.